nutrition care process, and the presenter is Pauline. So it's all about providing quality nutrition care to an individual or a group of people. It is actually made up of 4 steps. We have nutrition assessment, nutrition diagnosis, nutrition intervention, and lastly we have monitoring and evaluation. So in our class today we're going to start discussing nutrition assessment, which is the first step of the nutrition care process. Like I said earlier, this is a process that is scientific and systematic, and it aims at providing quality care to an individual or to a group of people. Yeah, so basically, before we discuss the steps, it will be wise for us to look at the model of nutrition care process. And from that slide, we are able to see the model. The model shows a cycle with arrows showing from one step to the next step, and the arrows shows a continuous cycle. So the first step there is nutrition assessment and reassessment, and then there is an arrow that indicates the next step, which is nutrition diagnosis. From diagnosis we have nutrition intervention, which is the third step of the care process, and then we have nutrition monitoring and evaluation, which is step number 4 in the nutrition care process. So basically this model helps healthcare professionals, and nutritionists being one of them, to provide quality care to individuals who need nutritional help. So that will take us to the first step, which is nutrition assessment. So we define nutrition assessment as a scientific method of identifying the nutritional status of a person or a group of people. If you want to identify if someone is having a good nutrition status or a poor nutrition status, you must conduct an assessment. So that is what nutrition assessment is all about. So we look at some of the methods of nutrition assessment, and we are going to highlight on 4. There are various methods, but we'll discuss the 4 major ones. So we have anthropometry, biochemical, clinical, and dietary methods. These are also known as the ABCDs of nutrition assessment. As you can see, we can give them initials of A, B, C, D. So we start looking at A, which is anthropometry. Yeah. So anthropometry basically is determining nutrition status of a person by measuring the body status or body parts so as to know their nutrition status. For example, taking the weight of a person or the height of a person and using the two to identify the nutrition status of a person. We know that with the body weight and height, a BMI can be calculated, and that can be used to determine the nutrition status. So when you measure any body part to determine nutrition status of a person, that is what anthropometry is all about. So in anthropometry, we can use various tools. We can take weight, we can take height, we can take the mid-upper arm circumference, etc. The second method of nutrition assessment is biochemical assessment, and this involves conducting a biochemical test on an individual to know their nutrition status. For example, if you want to know if someone is having a high blood sugar levels, you must do a sugar test in the blood. If you want to determine the lipid levels in an individual, a lipid test must be done. Another example is if you want to know the cholesterol levels in an individual, the cholesterol test is done in the blood. So when a test is being done in any body fluids, whether it is saliva, urine, or blood, so as to determine amount of nutrients in it and whether it is okay for a person to have those nutrients, then that is what biochemical assessment is all about. The third step or method of nutrition assessment is clinical assessment. In clinical assessment, it involves doing a physical examination on a person so as to determine their nutrition status. For example, you can just do a checkup. You look for any signs and symptoms of malnutrition so as to know if someone is having a good nutrition status or not. And a good example is for children suffering from kwashiorkor. Some of the signs that can easily be noted are the brown coloration of the hair. Then we have bilateral edema. The child might have a moon face or swollen belly, etc. So anytime someone does a physical examination on the body to know or to identify the nutrition status of a person, that is using a method known as clinical assessment. And lastly, we have data assessment, and this involves collecting information related to that. For example, you can try to acquire the diet history of a patient and use that information to determine their health and nutrition status. So basically that is step 1 of the nutrition care process. And after conducting nutrition assessment, the next step is nutrition diagnosis. So with the information you got from the assessment, you can now do a diagnosis. So basically, nutrition diagnosis is the process of identifying the problem of a person and clearly highlighting the possible etiology of the problem. So we identified the problem in step 1. Now in step 2, we are trying to identify the root cause of the problem and some of the signs and symptoms related to that problem. So that makes the components of nutrition diagnosis, and there are 3 components: the problem, which was identified in step 1, the etiology, which is the cause of the problem, and the signs and symptoms of the problem. So after doing a diagnosis on the nutrition problem, we come up now with an intervention, and that brings us to step 3, which is nutrition intervention. So nutrition intervention are well-planned approaches that aim at solving nutrition problems of a person or a group of people. So, for example, if we identified a problem to be kwashiorkor in the first step, and the second step we made a diagnosis and identified one of the causes, or what might have caused the kwashiorkor, was inadequate protein in the diet of the child. So now in our third step, we come up with a solution. How will we help this child with kwashiorkor? So that's what makes up an intervention, coming up with well-planned approaches which aims at solving the nutrition problem. Some of the approaches can be food aid or supplementation. Supplementation is basically provision of supplements. We have food fortification, and that is fortifying nutrients in commonly consumed foods so that the population at large can get the fortified vitamin or mineral. We have nutrition counseling, and that is a one-on-one session between a nutritionist and a client, whereby the nutritionist can help a client to change their feeding habits, which might be a root cause to their nutrition problem. And we have nutrition education, and basically that is providing general health education related to nutrition. It might not be a one-on-one session, but nutrition education covers a bigger population. So those are some of the approaches that can be used in nutrition intervention. Then the last step in the nutrition care process, we have monitoring and evaluation. And basically this is now checking for changes that can occur after providing an intervention. We determine or measure the amount of progress made for the nutrition intervention. Is the client recovering, or is the client not recovering? If the client is not recovering, we look for the next plan of action that will be suitable for the client. If the client is recovering, then that is an okay So that is what monitoring and evaluation is all about. Last but not least, it's always suitable to document all these processes of the nutrition care, all these steps of the nutrition care process. So documentation is important because it can help in future use. And there are two major methods of documenting information or the steps of nutrition care process. The first is the ADIME format, which basically is assessment, diagnosis, intervention, monitoring, evaluation format. So you document at each of those steps, you document everything that was done to the patient. And then another format of diagnosis or documenting nutrition care process is by use of SOAP format, whereby S stands for subjective, we have objective, assessment, and plan of action. Basically, the plan of action is all about the intervention that is to be made. So those are the two ways that can be used in documenting nutrition care process. And that marks the end of our today's session. Have a blessed day. Thank you.